All right. Well, good evening. It is 7:03. We will call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the roll call.
Tracy,
Here.
Camille,
Here.
Jonathan,
Here.
Jennifer,
Here.
Steve,
Present.
Dave Kaufman,
Here.
and Dave Jackson. I just let in, so he should be here in a second. Dave, you there?
I'm here. I guess my camera didn't start, but oh yeah, I see. I got to start that manually, but I'm here.
Okay. Dave Jackson.
All right.
Got everybody.
I have a quorum here. All right. So the second item on the agenda is the minutes approval for June 3rd. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll
All
second.
Okay.
This is Dave
I'm sorry,
Jackson
who was that the
seconding.
second? Okay. All right, all in favor for the, to approve the minutes as written, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, the minutes have been approved. Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is old business.
We don't have any old business, Tracy, so we can move on. Unless somebody has something.
Okay. New business, it looks like the first one is the 2021 budget.
Sorry, Tracy. I don't know if I lost you there for a second, but yeah, so I just kind of wanted to... Sorry, go ahead. Do you have something, Tracy? Sorry, are you guys losing me or can you hear me?
No, I think
hear
Tracy
you.
cut out.
You,
Okay.
I think Tracy was getting was dropping off a little.
No,
Okay.
I didn't say anything. It looks like
Freezing up?
yeah, it's freezing up.
Okay.
Tracy, you might turn off your video. That might help.
So the first thing I kind of wanted to walk you guys through was the 2021 budget. We did just start the budget process, and so this is our first draft of the budget. So I did want to be able to show it to you guys, and if you guys have any input, you're welcome to provide it. Because of your guys' meeting schedule, it could potentially get approved before your next meeting. So I at least maybe want to introduce it to you guys and let you see it. And if you guys have thoughts or concerns, let me know. I think I did share with you guys previously, as a result of COVID, we did have some loss of food and beverage revenue. And so we did actually cut about $600,000 out of the food and beverage budget for 2020. Most of those things were capital projects. And so the big one being that we made the decision to delay doing the bond to do the phase 1 park development project. So we are still planning to do that, but you'll also notice in the 2021 budget, our thoughts are we want to be able to continue to move forward with the design of the park development, but that we wouldn't actually probably do the bond until 2022 or late 2021 with construction starting in 2022. So with that, we're basically the budget that you guys have in front of you is assuming a flatline or pretty close to a flatline budget from what we had this year then on till next year as well. I'll kind of try to hit it high level and hit some of the things that there's not a lot of changes in this budget from last year. So you won't notice any really significant changes. Obviously, personnel is a big chunk of that. We are proposing to add an additional full-time park employee. And so there is some money in there for that. I'll talk a little bit more about that under the reorganization of the Parks Department that we'll talk about as the next agenda item. So that's kind of moving forward. Maintenance supplies, mostly operational things. If you guys recall, there's kind of two-part budget for parks. There's the impact fee and there's the food and beverage. The impact fee is strictly capital improvements. They have to be specifically for trails and sidewalks, land, trails, trails, land, playgrounds, or shelters. So you'll notice in the impact fee, we're proposing to start a new phase of trail and sidewalk design. Hopefully you guys notice we're out doing a lot of trail and sidewalk construction this year on the north side of 150 South by the high school, along Avon Avenue between 150 South and 100 South. And then all the sidewalk construction that's going on along US 36 is also part of that project that the town's doing.
Hey, Ryan, are you sharing your screen right now or trying to?
I am not.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't know if you meant to or not.
No, so
You're supposed to be following along.
I don't have it on the computer I'm on. I can try to pull it over if you guys need to see it on my screen if you'd like me to share it, but I kind of was hoping you guys had it.
Yeah, I'm looking, it's the one that's programmed by fund, right? Is that the one you're looking at?
Correct, yep. Yeah, I'm kind of going by, exactly, Dave. I'm kind of going by the program by fund one, and I'm kind of working my way down the columns.
A real quick question, Ryan. You said that the 200,000 that was cut this year, but you said we were flatlining from last year to this year. Is that before or after that $200,000 cut?
No, we cut about 650,000.
Oh, okay.
And so this year we had about a $1.7 million budget. And then as you'll see, next year we're proposing a $1.2 million budget.
On the food and beverage piece.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're closer to where we were after we did the cuts, Dave, not to where we were before we did the cuts.
Okay.
The next couple then on the form, we also have we have another payment for the 100 South property. We did actually close on the Light and Life property. And so we did make payment for that to the church. But if you guys recall, our agreement was we were paying them over 3 years. So our final payment for that is actually next year. And so that's why there's 40,000. That'll be our final payment on that. And then we'll own it. We budgeted to potentially still do a shelter drinking fountain and a restroom at the north side of the town hall park. Again, just because we budgeted doesn't mean we have to do it, but we're just earmarking money, especially in the impact fee. Any money we don't spend, we don't lose it. It just rolls over. And so it goes into our fund balance for the following year. So we still budget for it. And then depending on how our cash flow is, we can make the decision on whether we want to do that or not. The next one, the playground in particular, is one. We don't have a playground that we've earmarked to construct at this point. There are several playgrounds. There's one that we had proposed in our site plans at the Burnett Park, and then there was also one at the Winton Meadows Park. We don't particularly plan to do another playground at the Town Hall Park, even though we did have kind of like an outdoor play area, and so we may use that money to do something like that. Next year, every 5 years, we're actually required by law to update our recreation impact fee. And so next year is our 5th year. That study takes about 8 months to do. So we'll actually start it. Actually, hopefully get someone under contract to start it yet this year, maybe. And then basically by June of next year, we need to adopt it, because once we adopt it, it doesn't go into effect for 6 months. So we need to update that, and we'll establish a new fee. And you guys will have some involvement. The entire Parks Council won't participate in that, but normally there's a steering committee. And so we'll probably pull a couple members from the Parks Council to serve on the steering committee for that. And that's kind of an interesting process. So it'll be nice for a couple of you to be involved with that. And then the last one, again, is just kind of an earmark. We kind of set aside some money for some new parkland acquisition. Don't have a particular piece of property for that at this moment. But we did want to have some money there in case we decided that we wanted to do something. The next big thing I kind of want to talk about, it's on the agenda tonight as well, is we'd like to move forward with what I'm calling the schematic park site plans, or kind of getting into the engineering drawings. You know, what you guys have already seen for the new parks are conceptual plans, so they're not actually engineering plans that are prepared for bidding and going out to construction. And so we'd like to start that process of design again, maybe potentially this year. I've got it later on the agenda here for you guys to talk about and make sure you're comfortable with what we're proposing as phase 1. If everybody's good with that, then we may move forward with starting the design on that. You will notice, if you see this, there's a big yellow box on the program by fund for this item. And that's because we didn't budget the full amount. The estimate from Context to do the design for all 3 parks is the number in yellow, which is the $328,000. But we didn't necessarily have enough money to do all of that. And so we're falling short about $70,000. So we may have to pay that out of the 2022 budget, or if we're able to encumber some money from this year's budget, if at the end of the year, if we have it. And so we don't necessarily have enough to budget the whole item. And that's why it's in yellow. I kind of have that out there so people understand that. The next item then is update the bike and ped master plan. Our bike and ped master plan was actually updated. We did it in 2010, so it's 10 years old. The plan itself doesn't necessarily really need to be updated, but the part of the plan was to identify segments and prioritize the construction of those segments based on the value of the connections. And the goal of the bike and ped master plan is to make connections to churches, schools, and businesses. And so that plan really identified where we should invest our money to get the biggest bang for our buck. And so since we're kind of outside of that initial window, we'd kind of like to do a reevaluation of that and kind of identify what those next segments should be that we're targeting to create connectivity. Again, you guys would have some participation in that. Again, it may be a couple of you, it may not be the whole group, but you guys will get to vet it. We'll send it through the Parks Council to review and give us their feedback on it. Parks programming and activities. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit during our reorganization, but really as a result of COVID, it's been a little bit difficult on us from a programming standpoint. We're not able to do big group gatherings and things like that. So Delbert has done a good job continuing to do. We did do our movies in the park, and we've continued to partner with the township on the concerts in the park at the township. We have done some smaller group programs. We're still doing arts in the park, and we're doing some of those things. RC festival and some of those things that we've done in the past, we aren't able to really do them. So we did reduce our programming budget a little bit. Next year, just we weren't really spending it all anyway. So I don't think that it won't impact our ability to do programs, but we just didn't budget quite as much money. Again, we've got a couple equipment replacements in there. We try to replace a couple pieces of equipment every year and to add some new equipment if necessary. So we try to kind of maintain those capital expenditures. A little bit of a change. We haven't put as much in for beautification in the community. In the past, we'd budget quite a few money for doing what we call beautification, which would be like tree planting along roads. We're kind of reassessing that effort to see if we want to continue to do it. We may do some smaller scale beautification, but not large scale planting trees everywhere along roadways. We've found that we've struggled to operate and maintain some of those, in that we may just change our philosophy in the way that we do it. It won't be that we won't do any beautification. An example I'll give you is on the Ronald Reagan Parkway. I don't know how often you guys drive the Ronald Reagan Parkway, but you'll notice we created like some planting areas in the middle and on the outside that are kind of grouped together, where there's like a nice grouping of plantings that look nice. We may try to do some things more like that, versus in that same segment of like of Ronald Reagan Parkway between like 100 South and 200 South, there's like 300 trees. We've really struggled to keep those trees alive. They've not really, I think we've replaced them 2 or 3 times, and we're struggling. We're finding that the environment for them just isn't that supportive. So we're kind of reassessing that and making a determination if we want to keep doing it or not. That's probably really it. We did put some money in as well for maintenance, building improvement, increasing office and storage space. So that's really it in the budget. Happy to answer any questions if you guys have them, or if you have any thoughts or concerns or things you'd like to recommend us considering that we missed, please let me know.
Well, Ryan, it looks like, as I'm interpreting what you've got here, is that you're putting in some money from next year's budget for the schematic, okay, for the new parks that would come from, be built with the future bond.
Correct. Yeah, exactly, Dave. So we're budgeting to do some of the design. And so instead of paying for the design out of the bond, we're just proposing to use existing budget to pay for that.
Okay. And in the same vein, I guess the north end of park, the shelter, drinking fountain, restroom is also then really coming out of that bond issue and just being a project that would be funded by next year's budget.
Correct. Potentially. So if you remember, we talked about doing like a $3 million bond, but our phase 1 is really almost $4 million. So what we would do, Dave, is if we do spend some of that money out of our cash, we would just do a smaller construction project as part of the bond. So instead of saying we're doing $4 million, we're going to do $3 million, but we're going to spend $1 million of our cash on hand.
Okay. Okay. So it's still from that conceptual design, but we're, I guess, reduce the demand or reduce the size of the bond as best we can.
Correct. Yeah. And we would only do that on, there are some items that we can break out that are unique to in and of themselves. And so, we want to be able to benefit from cost savings of doing everything at once, but whoever builds our shelter isn't also going to do, the prairie planting in the Burnett Park. And so that construction is something that's easily we can separate out and still accomplish.
The north end stuff, you mean, because it would be a separate mobilization and all that sort of thing?
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. No, I just, that way I want to make sure I convey the right description of what's possible in terms of with the folks in the neighborhood and everything.
Yes, and Dave, if please convey to them that we're not putting it in the hill.
I know.
And that we're proposing, if they go to the site plan, it shows the location of the shelter. And it's the one that's further away from them is the one we're proposing to build, so.
Right, so it's on, yeah, I guess at the south end of the parking lot, right across the trail.
Correct, yep.
Okay.
And that's the one in the meeting, everybody kind of said, yes, we're okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And they liked that location better than the other one, so. I hope
And
they
so that project,
recognize we listened to them and moved it
oh,
for them.
sure. And so that project, if it does move forward, then is there still got to be a design and then a bid for design and then a bid for construction, or would that all be done as one sort of bid package?
So the agreement that we have with Context will be to design the entire bid package. But we'll probably be able to break it out and have them, and we're talking about probably probably going to be a prefabricated structure, Dave. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily going to have a lot of design. There may be a little bit of engineering with it, and there may be some working through some of the details of the location and the shape and the architecture, but it's not going to be as much of a significant design as something else. So
Sure.
It has restrooms, though, right?
it would, yes, it would have restrooms.
I guess,
it'll
and so
be-
that part maybe is not a prefab thing. That would be just a room or two rooms built to accommodate with the plumbing and all that.
It could. I mean, we've had some discussions with our architects. There are a lot of prefab restrooms out there now that you can buy them and bring them in and basically set them down and connect them to sewer and you're good to go.
Oh,
So we haven't got into the design of that yet. So I don't know the specifics of it yet. And obviously cost will come into consideration, but we also want something that looks nice. So we kind of need to work through the details of that and what that'll look like, Dave. But
okay.
we'll
Very
definitely
good.
make sure
So-
that as that progresses, that we're still continuing to communicate with Stratford about what's happening.
No problem. And then obviously, so it wouldn't be a clone of what's at the other playground area, that shelter and that restroom at all.
No, yeah, no, that's not the intent.
Okay. And I don't know, are you familiar with what they did at Cardinal Park in Brownsburg with the restroom?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I didn't know if, I mean, I've been there. I didn't know, it was right next to their new dog park, and I didn't know if that was a prefab or what kind of,
I don't think that's prefab.
you don't think it is? Okay,
I've ridden by there a few times. It's concrete block and shingle roof and stuff. So I think
I
that's
see, okay. And it seems pretty, I mean, it's a very functional, it's nice to have it right where it is. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome. Anyone else have any questions?
I have one, Ryan. The update bike and pedestrian master plan, is that something, are you expanding Context, I guess, contract with us to include more master plan work?
I don't know. I've given some thought to that. Context didn't do the original one. CHA did it, but the person who worked there and did it for us is no longer there. And so I don't know if there's value in me going back to them to update it, or I kind of thought about that too, Steve, or maybe I can expand Context to do that as well. I don't know if they have a lot of experience doing that type of work or not. So before we made that decision, I'd probably want to talk to them about that and see if they've done it. Or the other alternative is we could always go out and do an RFQ and go through a selection process for somebody to help us take it through that next step.
Okay.
Okay. If there aren't any more questions, I guess we can move on to the reorganization of Parks Department.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we've obviously have had some changes here at the town. I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but one of the things we were doing previously, and it was a little bit disjointed, was our programming staff worked directly for me, and then we kind of had an operational staff that worked for me as well. But the two groups didn't really work together, and so what we really found was that wasn't very functional. It wasn't very efficient, and we had some conflict back and forth between the two different groups because they didn't work for each other. So if you guys kind of look at the organizational chart, and I know there's not names with it, and I don't know that the names are important, but as I walk you guys through it, I'm happy to share names with you if you'd like to know. But we're kind of proposing to make our existing, which is Gary Gamble, who's our director of operations, to basically be the parks director. And then we're kind of bringing everybody underneath his authority. And so we kind of create two departments then underneath the parks director's position. One would be programs, trails, and forestry, which kind of work together. So we can do some educational things on the forestry front and programming. And so currently Kim Freeman, who works for us, would fill that role and kind of be in charge of that. And then on the other way, we do operations and maintenance manager, which would be Chuck McGee, who kind of handles all of our maintenance and the operations then at the Town Hall Park. And then we've kind of plugged, so next underneath Kim would be, we're proposing to do Delbert, which is basically the programming. But then he would also do some other things as well. Rudy has opted to move over towards the operations and maintenance side, so he would probably work for Chuck. And then we're talking about filling one of the full-time positions. Rudy's only part-time. And then we'd have a couple of part-time positions underneath them as well. So the thought in this is that we're kind of taking better advantage of our resources, our more senior employees, to kind of take more of a leadership role, but then that we're also training our other employees so that we have a succession plan as well. So when someone moves on, we have someone who's underneath them who can then step up and kind of fill that position and kind of keep building moving forward. So just kind of wanted to share that structure with you guys. That's the structure that's actually budgeted in the budget that we just went over. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have them. We do have I won't give you names of other employees, but we do have part-time employees that fill those other positions as well. The only vacancy that we currently have would be the full-time position underneath the operations and maintenance. Currently, that's a vacant position. We only have 4 full-time positions now, and so we're proposing to go to 5 full-time positions. And we did actually have a budget of 5 part-time employees, and so we're actually proposing to reduce that to 4 part-time employees. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Just kind of cleaning up. We're actually functioning and operating this way now, and it's working really well. They're all working better as a team versus kind of programming on one side and operations on the other. So I think it's a good change for our parks department, and we're looking forward to seeing what they can do.
Yeah,
And I think Gary's been, does he have kind of that group, has been there the longest?
I'm sorry, what's that, Dave?
Gary Gamble, he's been there the longest of that group of people?
Yeah, Gary's the most senior employee we've got. I think he's been here 9 years now. But he's worked in parks pretty well his whole career. As you know, Dave, he worked at the Washington Township Park before he was here, and Kim worked there as well. So they both have a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to add a full-time position when you're planning to do less programming going into next year?
No, not necessarily. And so right now we have a position and a half. In Delbert's position, even though it's that I kind of gave a title for it, it won't actually probably be a full-time programming position. he will do other things other than just programming. So he may do trails and he may do forestry. He'll do other things to help that group. And so I know by title, that's what it looks like, that it's a full-time position, but he will do other things other than just full-time programming.
Okay, thanks.
Mm.
Mhm.
Do we have any more questions on the reorganization chart? Okay, so then the next item is introduction of proposal for trails. We have the Libby Whipple letter, I guess.
Yeah, so I don't expect you guys to take any action on this tonight. I'd more like you guys to just review this information that Libby's provided. Most of you are relatively new, so you may not know Libby, but she's been really active in the arts community. And so she used to coordinate Arts in the Park that was held here. It was a great event. She stopped being involved with it and it kind of went downhill. And so Libby reached out to the council president and I about this idea that she's proposed here. And that's, you know, her letter is pretty self-explanatory, but the concept is there a way for the town to do something that would support social justice in a way that was positive. And so she's been working on this, and her idea is to put inspirational quotes basically on pieces of rock and then put them somewhere. We haven't worked through all the details of where they would go. I've had some discussions with her. I've kind of steered her away from the White Lake Creek Trail because I don't think that's conducive to having places where people stop and look at things and read. It's more of a recreational corridor where people may be riding bikes or going faster. So what I've suggested to her is the right place may be like the Burnett Park. So, you know, we have lots of natural trails and things like that. And so maybe we would have kind of small nodes along the way where people would be able to stop and look at the stones and read the quotes. And she's even gone as far as thinking about finding a way to put QR codes on the signage so that people could actually use their phones when they're walking, use the QR codes off of there, and then you could get additional information about the quotes or the people themselves. And so that's why you'll notice she kind of did profiles of the people who made the quotes. And so it's really just a concept at this point. I think kind of what I talked to her about doing was that I wanted to be able to share this with you guys today. It's a lot of information. I wanted you guys just kind of be able to think about it. So maybe just review the information, think about it, think if it's something that we are willing to support and that we'd like to see in our parks or as part of our park system. She doesn't object to it going somewhere else. She said if, you know, Avon doesn't want it, she could pursue Washington Township. And I kind of said, well, no, I kind of like the idea, and the Burnett Park may be a perfect place for it. So I kind of said, stay with us, please. And if we decide it doesn't work for us or we don't have the right piece of property for it, then certainly she's welcome to go on and talk to Washington Township. And so she was not able to be here tonight because she was out of town. And so, like I said, I told her, let's just share the information with you guys now, let you guys think about it. And then I think at your November meeting, she will actually be there in person. And so, or hopefully we can actually do the whole meeting in person as long as everything's doing okay. And then she will do a much better job talking about what her vision is of it. But I think it's really cool. I think it's a great idea. But again, would like you guys to kind of absorb it and see what you guys think.
I did read through the letter and all that. I think it's a good idea. My only worry in this day and age is finding the right inspirational quotes that aren't somehow controversial, because it seems like everything's controversial these days, you know, and so that might be the biggest challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Dave. And Libby and I have had that discussion, and that's what she said. She actually, in her first version that she submitted to me, she had about 4 pages of quotes. And I think through her research, she's narrowed them down. And as she's done research on the people in the background, she's tried to be kind of find things that were non-controversial. But again, that's why I think it's important for all of you guys to vet it and think about it, because that's what we'd like to avoid, is that kind of issue, Dave. So
Yeah,
Exactly.
at my first glance at this, with 17 of these, there really are some really nice inspirational messages with among all these.
You know, I think it's an awesome idea. I do think the quote aspect of it, you know, and people having different interpretations of it or whatever, could, if that's an issue, I mean, you could maybe look at making this kind of a flexible piece of artwork that has a placard or something that can be removed and replaced with another one, you know, so it's kind of it's something that can be changed yearly or every 5 years or never. I mean, it depends. You know, if someone has a better quote or something, they can slide a new one in.
What I worry about is with the rioting and all that kind of stuff going on, people having these opinions and then coming and destroying things. You know, that's more what I'd be worried about. Someone just taking it upon themselves to think that it's okay because they didn't agree with the quote. So that's what I just think we have to be careful. So.
Yeah, wow.
'Cause
Yeah, I think.
certainly you just with anything in the public space, and we've even seen this on the Beano Trail, and there's a new tunnel and there's already graffiti on it, and sometimes people are just being mean-spirited just to be, and they're doing it anonymously and putting graffiti on something. It's not like, and so you have that, and unfortunately with parks and public spaces, that it's always been a risk. It's been there even before this year.
Very true.
I mean,
I'm a fan of it. I don't think
yeah, I'm a
Gandhi's ever
fan
been
of it, too.
controversial.
Go ahead, Jonathan. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I mean, they're not even controversial figures at this point. You know, I mean, they're like, you know, Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, they're all established in history. If I would be careful with, you know, like recency of things. I think if you let time prove that, you know, the majority of people agree, but, and I agree, graffiti and damage and stuff is going to risk no matter what it is. But it's just, you know, part of being open to the public. So I'd support this left, right, and center.
Yeah, I like this idea too. I think that, you know, especially with the park, and it's just a relaxing place to be, to take a walk and spend time in. You know, it can, you know, you can walk in, have some reflection, and I think it's a great idea. And then it's helping to shape the culture of the community. That this is how we feel. This is how, you know, we just believe in inspiration, you know. I mean, I like it. I like the idea, but, you know, of course, you know, as we have time to really digest all of it and just think of all the different things, the pros and the cons, you know, we can be ready for it in November.
Yeah, I think that'll give us a lot of time to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be it could be inspirational quotes about nature, something too. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be quotes from specific people. You know, there's different ways to approach it. But I think by October we'll have a lot more time to digest it and think about it, like you said.
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah,
think that,
nature can be tied back to, you know, back to your, you know, everyday life. I mean, really. So, yeah. Cool, too.
but I like
I'm sorry,
the, I
did
guess,
I cut off? Okay, Jay,
that's
sorry.
okay. But a themed approach in terms of, if you had a section of trail or whatever where these were going to be placed, and you know, you called it would it be a trail of reflection or a trail of inspiration, or, you know, and giving it an overall name that sort of ties this together, I think is I like that idea. Because it sort of is, it's going to brand that, that this collection of things. And again, it's in a very positive light and everything that hopefully it's something that really the whole community could support. The one thought I had is that if you had, let's say if you had 24 quotes and you were going to only use 18 of them, and do you do a public vote and have people pick their favorites or something? But that maybe is one thought, because there are so many, but you'd want to control the list and say, okay, pick from these and vote on these versus folks trying to submit other ones.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that thought, Dave, about having it be a section of a trail or something like that instead of the whole trail. I like that picture that's included of this with the kind of arboretum that they have at the Ascension Health St. Vincent on Harcourt. I mean, that looks like a focused area that would have the quotes, and it could be along a whole line of a trail or something like that, so it's kind of an accent area on the trail rather than the whole thing.
I think it'd be cool at the disc golf course too. Like each hole has a different quote.
Yeah, the only problem, you have a limited audience there, I suppose. Then you have people would be going out there to see them that aren't participating in the disc golf.
Okay.
I
I think that's great. It sounds, I like your ideas, and we may be able to start talking with context too. And as they're developing the plans, we'll maybe see if we can't work something in. I kind of like that idea too, Dave, about kind of like a trail of inspiration or a trail of reflection or something like that. And maybe we can make it a loop and find, 8 to 10 spots where people can stop along it or something. So we'll see if maybe we can tie that in with context as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about it in November.
Okay. All right. If there aren't any more questions or comments for this item, we'll move on to phase 1, park development.
So I know I've kind of talked about this a little bit already. And I think I've shown this to you guys already. I couldn't remember, so I wanted to put it on here to make sure you guys did see it. But since we're working with context on potentially moving forward with the design, I did want to make sure that you guys had at least seen and you were aware of what we were proposing to do as part of phase 1. So did Jasmine give you guys the whole contract, or was it is your first page just say phase 1 conceptual cost opinion?
Whole contract's in there.
Okay. So it's like page 5. If you guys skip the first part, which is of less interest, I more so want you guys to look at, it's like page, I think 5, 6, 7, 8, and then there's a couple exhibits. In particular, the phase 1 conceptual cost opinion, the whole concept kind of as we started and what we were talking about for the phase 1, and again, we're talking about the $3 to $4 million bond that we would do, is that we would kind of lay the infrastructure and the foundation of the parks, and that there'd be elements, some of the more expensive elements, such as like the building and the splash pad, that maybe those elements would come later, but that we'd still lay the foundation. We'd create some parking. We would create the ability to start using and enjoying the parks, but that we wouldn't necessarily do the entire site plan for all of them. The other guidance that we got was we didn't want to spend all our money at one park and do nothing at the other. And so if you notice in here, we've proposed to spend really the biggest chunk at the Burnett Park, but we're also doing some things at the Winton Meadows Park, and then we're also proposing to do some things at the Town Hall Park. So again, mostly infrastructure. I don't necessarily want to walk through these with you guys if you want to, but I'm happy to. But if you guys would just look at it and if you guys have some thoughts, and then after those conceptual cost opinions, there's some exhibits that show the areas and the amenities that we're proposing. And so those maps may be more helpful to you guys than anything to kind of visualize what we do. Moving the disc golf course out of the woods and protecting those woods in the north end of the park is one of the things at Town Hall Park. And then, as we kind of already talked about, the restroom and shelters, doing some shade structures, doing some woodland enhancements to kind of protect and preserve the woods at the Town Hall Park. At Burnett Park, again, it's kind of laying the foundation, putting the wetlands in, establishing kind of the trail system, building a small parking lot that would accommodate some users. It's not the full build parking lot we would need eventually when we build the actual building there, or if we decide to build the actual building there, but it would still give people the opportunity to come and park at the park and then have access both to Burnett Woods and to the Burnett Park as well. And then we also included a few elements at the Winton Meadows Park, kind of like the central gathering area. And this may be the area where we do, we're showing an informal nature play area, which is essentially a playground, but it's a natural playground, areas where kids could play, but it wouldn't be a traditional playground that's yellow and blue and green and fluorescent colors. It's something more natural that fits into the environment. So, that may be our playground amenity that we do. And then we'd build a couple of trails and we'd build some trailheads, basically to advertise that the parks are there and to show people where they can go to enter and start enjoying the parks. So
I have a question on the, you were talking about moving part of the disc golf course out of the woods. And I was just wondering if it's a pretty active group that goes out there and plays disc golf. In the wood section is one of the most interesting sections. I was just wondering if there would be some dissatisfaction with that. I know that that's one of my favorite parts, and is actually the wood section is my favorite part rather than the open section. So it's more challenging.
Yeah, we've had some
get around the trees and and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've had some preliminary discussions with them. They've told us they'd like to keep it in the woods, but we're experiencing damage to trees and the ground's getting trampled. And we've had some people from DNR look at it, and they've really said that we've negatively impacted the health of the forest. It's really the only forested area we have in the park. And so, that was something we just discussed of, do we want to be able to protect that, or are we willing to start, if the trees start dying, are we willing to basically lose our forest? And so it really becomes an issue of, yeah, we don't particularly want to take it out of there, but we think for the success of our forest and wooded area that we probably need to take it out of there. We've talked to the disc golf folks about the redesign, and we'd probably have them involved in the redesign. And if we need to plant some additional elements to add to that, that's something we may need to do. But ultimately, like I said, we kind of made that decision that protecting the forest was probably more important than having a really great disc golf course.
I agree with that. I think there are some, like you're saying, there's some other creative solutions you can come up with. Maybe if you move the course, having some trees planted in the right place, clusters of trees where you're not really in the woods and walking through them, but you still have to figure out how to uniquely get around those when you're playing the course and stuff like that. I think that would give similar elements without trampling. So or going into just the edge, something like have some holes that are just on the edge of the woods, things like that. So okay, I was just curious what the discussion had been, and I suspected that was the case. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, do we have any other comments or questions for the Phase 1 park development?
I just like to, and if we do start phasing in phase one, like where to start first, I vote Lincoln Meadows. Just selfish from the north side.
Sorry, Jonathan, you kind of broke up. I heard a little bit of it, but not all of it.
I was
I think
saying
he said
that
I think he said that he
if
wanted.
we start having to, yeah.
I'm joking because I'm right by Burnett Park. He actually said Winton Meadows would be his vote for where to start for one stuff, and he said Burton Meadows. Or,
Yep.
Gotcha.
Anyway.
Okay.
I guess when you mentioned it, I just want to make sure that if we move ahead with the phase one at Burnett Woods or Burnett Park, it still has a master plan. We wouldn't be ripping anything out in the future to accommodate the master plan. They're kind of working from that master plan and just building pieces of it as they progress.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole concept is, and that's what this phase one may not look as exciting because it doesn't have some of the cool elements, but it is setting the infrastructure and the basis. And that's exactly it, Steve. We don't want to put something in and then have to come back and rip it back out. Plus, it has a lot of planting prairies and putting in the native planting stuff. Those take time to grow and develop. And so we kind of get those things in place and to start growing. It also helps us on our maintenance side that we're not all of a sudden inundated with all this new amenities and things for us to now take care of that we don't necessarily have the staff to do. And so it kind of helps ease us into it. And the next step in this is if you guys recall, there was a component of this conceptual site plan, which was we were going to do an operational analysis. So now that we've established what we're going to do, context is actually going to give us what it's going to cost to take and maintain these facilities. And so those will be things we'll take into consideration. These things that they're proposing are really going to be low maintenance for us. We think we'll probably be able to maintain these with our existing staff without having to add them. But as we start adding things like the buildings and the splash pads and the play areas, those become more intensive for our staff. And so those are things we kind of want to wait, make sure we can manage what we've got and before we take the next step to do more.
Okay. We don't, do we have any other comments or questions before we move on to the next item? Okay, great. The next is staff updates.
Yeah, so just real quick, I did not put updating names or naming parks and trails on your guys' agenda. We've had a lot going on, and with the changes in the organizational structure, I'm kind of going to pull some of those new staff members in to kind of help with that. And so that will probably be on your next agenda. I've kind of turned that over to them to kind of provide you guys some guidance. And so we haven't lost track of that. So I just didn't want you to think we'd lost track of it, but we'll probably circle around with you guys at your next meeting and discuss it a little further.
Okay.
And then kind of the final thing was to update the bike and ped master plan. And we kind of talked about that already. And so Steve kind of circled around to that already. The point I had, which was, would a couple of you be willing to participate or to help us select a consultant or kind of be a steering committee for that? And so I don't know if one or two of you would maybe be willing to volunteer to kind of help us make that decision, or if we decide to do an RFQ, kind of review those proposals and select someone to help us actually do the update.
I'd like to be a part of that.
Is that
Dave, are
Tracy?
you talking?
What's
Yes,
that now?
that was Tracy.
Okay.
That was,
No,
I'm
Dave
sorry,
Kaufman,
I'm
he
talking
wants
on
to
I'm
keep
talking on mute, so my lips
Okay.
are moving. But yes, I'm interested as well. Sorry, I realized that I wasn't coming through.
Okay.
Sorry.
Tracy and Dave Kaufman.
Yes.
Okay. Great. All right. As we'll kind of start developing things, and we'll circle back around with you guys, and certainly the whole group, you guys, again, will have some involvement. And as we do, normally we do public meetings and stuff with those. So we'll want to get your guys' input and keep you involved in that process, and keep your eyes open when you're out there and see where segments are that we're missing that would be high value segments. So you can share that with our consultant when we have those meetings.
Okay.
That's all I've got for staff updates.
All right. So other business is the next agenda.
Well, real quick, Ryan, since we're talking bike and ped master plan and that, if you can maybe comment on the crossings of Rockville Road, like there by Avon United Methodist and even Ronald Reagan, where I guess I know that's NDOT and some of that's tied into their schedule.
Yeah, so Avon United Methodist is part of our project. They just haven't done it yet. But we are actually putting in that pedestrian crossing there. And so that should still happen yet this year. Before the end of the year, that should go up.
Oh, great. Okay, because the road was open. I thought, oh, great. They did all that, and we didn't. And I know they're changing signals and stuff like that. So if it's still coming, that's awesome.
Yeah, nope, it's still coming. The trail hasn't been paved yet, so they still have some additional work to do. They've paved some of it, but they hadn't finished it. But they will put in that pedestrian crossing as well. The Ronald Reagan Parkway one, we are not doing. NDOT is doing that project, and it will be part of their added travel lane project on US 36. And so they will do that next year. As well as I know, it's on the schedule to start construction around April of next year, and they've committed to having it done by Thanksgiving of 2021. And so that means by the end of next year, that pedestrian crossing for Ronald Reagan will be in place as well.
Oh, great. Okay.
Great.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Anything you guys would like to be talking about that we're not talking about?
I had a thought earlier, or well, I guess the other day. What would it look like to try to get some sort of mile markers or distance markers on some of the trails?
Mm-hmm.
I just because I live right by Bicentennial Trail. It's just a giant straightaway, and it would be kind of nice to like mark a mile or 100 yards and stuff like that. Be handy.
Well, and even beyond that, just from the distances, but even from a 911 identification, if you have an emergency, because we did that on what Brownsburg did on the B&O was, and we were following the old mile markers from the railroad. So they're like numbers are like 125 and 126 and all that. But you've got all these trails now, and maybe from a 911, I should say, standpoint, being able to give people direction of where they are if there's an emergency is another angle of that too.
That's
a good point, Dave, because that's actually something we've been working on, and so that's something I've talked to Gary about. We put some money in the budget for next year. There was actually $35,000 in there for security cameras and doing exactly what you're talking about, Dave, establishing areas. And that also builds into the naming of the parks and trails, so that if somebody calls, they can say, I'm on the Bicentennial Trail at blah, blah marker. And so, there are places that it's not the Bicentennial, and we've had people who've called us before, and they're like, I'm by Oaks of Avon on the trail. Well, that's a half mile long. It's really hard to find somebody. So we are planning something. We've actually met already with the fire department and the police department to kind of put that into motion to figure out what that would look like, the frequency of it, and how they would respond based on us providing that information. And so a combination of the naming the trails and that money that we have planned to spend for security, I think we can do exactly that. I think it's a great idea.
Does the YMCA trail belong to the town of Avon?
It does not.
Okay.
It belongs to Hendricks Regional Health, but as part of our agreement with the YMCA, they have to have it available for public use.
Okay. So what about the community? Is it the community garden? So that area doesn't belong to Avon Town Hall either. I thought Delbert said something, and I can't remember what he said.
Yeah, so same thing, Tracy, as part of our agreement, we are permitted to utilize and schedule their property when they're not in use. And so
Oh,
we have some lease rights, but Delbert actually worked on that last year with the YMCA, and they basically said we use it from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 5 days a week or 7 days a week. And if you want to program it before 8 a.m. and you want to program it after 8 p.m., go ahead. And so
oh, okay.
that didn't really work for us. Now, we did partner with them on that community garden. And so I think our park staff went over, or we may have contracted with someone, I can't remember, but I think we went over and we tilled the dirt for them. And then I think they actually do the scheduling and the programming of the community gardens. But I think we provided some dirt and we did some labor for them to prep it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay, I was just curious. Anything else? Anyone, any questions or comments, or like Ryan said, if there's something you wanted to talk about that we didn't discuss today?
Ryan, I have one item, but it's not park related. But we can talk after everybody, after we adjourn.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's a perfect segue into, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a second. Great. All in favor of adjourning at 8:05, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. All right.